Hello, our friends, Evolutionary Energy Arts family.
Why, hello there.
I hope everybody is staying warm out there.
Yes, we really are thinking about you guys a lot.
Sassy is sunning herself inside with the sun coming down through the window to stay nice and warm. It's been cold where we are. It's winter wonderland. We have over a foot of snow.
Yeah, it's nice to look outside.
You know, it's sobering though, because it makes you think, what if I was in a single wide with very little insulation because I didn't expect anything like what we've seen happen.
And your whole life you've never seen anything like this happen. So why would you ever prepare for it? I mean, sometimes places get so hot. I remember being in Nevada and it was so hot that I would see like a jacket or a blanket in the closet and I would just get hot looking at it. So when I went through my stuff, I actually got rid of so much warm clothes because I never thought that I would need them.
Yeah. Well, these are changing times as you see that picture in front of you there. So that's Kemah, Texas. It's a seaside subtropical town about 45 minutes from Houston, completely frozen over in ice, solid. When did people think we would see stuff like this? Other than, those of you that have been listening to channels like this, Adapt 2030, Ice Age Farmer, and the like, that have been talking about what's coming, or reading books from Robert Felix as well. Crazy times we are in. Let's start off, if we can, by sending a prayer to everybody that is suffering in the cold right now. We were watching a little video clip from a local news agency over there in Texas. And this lady who was about 60 was speaking about her brother who was 57. They were just huddled up in the cold in the house, and he died from it. And he had no underlying conditions. They were just wrapped up in like 4 blankets, and he succumbed to the cold.
Yeah, the body goes into shock. Has never experienced that.
It's absolutely crazy. There's so much more going on than meets the eye here. And we see, why are millions of people in Texas still without power? That's a good question, and why Texas as well? This is interesting because the country is divided into 3 grids, and this is out of MSN.com. One covers the eastern U.S., another the western states, and then there's the Texas grid, which covers nearly the entire state. So it's the Texas one that went down. And, of course, this polar vortex, but it feels different. Situation going on where we had the extreme cold coming so far down over the center of the country, causing obviously massive usage. And then, of course, we got basically partisan politics always going on. You see Beto O'Rourke blames Republican leaders for the Texas power outages. We're nearing a failed state. And this is one of the fastest growing states in the country, as people have flooded into it in recent, last decade or so. It's been growing steadily the whole time. And it's become an economic powerhouse. And we've talked about, what states could do it on their own and be a real, strong, viable country. Texas comes to mind first and foremost, I think in many people's minds. And here Texas is being brought down to its knees. And by the way, we have 150,000 still without power in Oregon as well. And there's people that have been losing their lives all over the country, really, when we look at it due to the severe weather.
Yeah, there are people who just simply were not prepared, didn't think they needed to prepare, and rightfully so, because we've never seen anything like this. It's just insane.
It's a sign of the times in so many ways. So we see Clackamas County Sheriff's Office confirmed 4 deaths over the weekend due to carbon monoxide poisoning. We've seen a lot of that, unfortunately. In Oklahoma, a 53-year-old Broken Arrow man died Monday after falling through ice at Grand Lake in northeast Oklahoma. Baton Rouge, down in Louisiana, we see Louisiana Department of Health confirming 3 deaths related to winter weather this week. They include a 50-year-old man in Lafayette Parish who slipped on ice, hit his head. 74-year-old woman, Lafayette Parish, found in neighbor's driveway dead of exposure in the driveway, probably just going between houses. 77-year-old man in Calcasieu Parish who drowned after slipping on ice and falling in a swimming pool. And, it's not just there. And, of course, it always seems like there's just one thing on the officials' minds, that they seem to be so concerned with. Nebraska, brutal. We were talking to one of our family members up there, and she was saying how the temp there was actually colder than it was in Alaska.
Yes, she was commenting on that. So we got so much going on.
And, Memphis, Tennessee as well. It's cold everywhere. So, at least 20 people have perished. Probably quite a bit higher. There's actually some localities that are calling for freezing containers like we've seen before in the opening days of the pestilence upon the land and in many other countries as well, to store people in until things can return to some sort of semblance of normalcy and families can have their time. It's really, really sad, guys. Obviously, it's horrible. We see 3.2 million without power still in Texas, 158,000, almost 159 in Oregon. California does have 12,000 without power as well. Louisiana, it's down to 62,000. And 14,500 in Mississippi, 94,000 Kentucky, 70,000 West Virginia. And Virginia has 37,000, and Ohio almost 18,000. So still quite a bit of power outages going on.
I know, I'm looking at this and I'm just really hoping now that the weakness has been exposed, which technologies might they bring in to kind of repair these weak points in the system?
And, there's been talk about, migrations of people from certain areas to certain areas. Every area has its issues. California, we've had the wildfires. Colorado, we've had, record-breaking wildfires as well. Of course, we had more hurricanes than like ever, and so many landings. And Louisiana got pounded with the hurricanes. What will this year bring? Who knows? It just seems like ever since 2017, things have just gone straight up, and it feels like they're going up even farther. This was interesting. Unusual lava flow spotted in Himachal, Pradesh in India. It's a volcanic eruption, quote unquote, that took place in an area that has absolutely zero history of it. Of course, when you look at the Himalayas, they're the biggest mountains on Earth currently. And at one time, the thought is Appalachians were actually as big. Many millennia ago, millions of years, they tell us. And so one of the things that, like we were talking about, that our friend David was talking about too, Adapt 2030, is the stress on the Earth's crust. And you're going to see all sorts of unusual activity in unusual spots.
We are, and I did have visions, a little while ago of how the Earth would be sort of kind of going like an inside out, how things would be coming from the ground and the ground would be folding under.
Yeah, I remember you sharing that. That's so ominous sounding. And of course, everybody has different takes. I saw a comment where somebody was quoting Mavstar, and we're aware of him too. We don't have time to watch everybody's videos. There's just not enough time in the day, because most days we spend 6 to 8 hours helping people individually, as well as doing our own research and also doing our spiritual pursuits, which we will never slack off of. That's always got to take priority, and it has to actually take a higher priority than it has, even though it's usually like 1 to 2 hours every day. The only safe place is within the heart. That's the bottom line.
It's so true.
And we see historic snowstorm leaves 3 dead in Greece as well. Again, this is global. Are we heading towards another mud flood event? Are we heading towards another ice age? When the ice age, as I've been saying to Cindy, when we are in a full ice age, Florida is like 3 to 4 times the size it is. When the seas retreat because of everything being basically locked up in the polar areas, then it's a totally different situation. And then again, the planet becomes habitable in a very narrow band of existence there.
Yeah, very curious how things kind of fall together.
And we have disruptive snow over Syria, Lebanon, and Israel as well. Again, the Holy Land, the deserts, changing weather patterns, absolutely. Blocking roads, disrupting normal life. There is a new norm, and that's going to be just basically, hang on tight and roll with the punches and be as prepared as you can.
Yeah, be flexible and prepared.
We have friends that we know we won't end up being with through these times, just because of the areas that they're in. Yet they are set up so well with food. I mean, literally talking, we know one couple in New Mexico that's got tons of food in storage. Tons of food in storage already because they've been preparing for this.
Right. They are ready.
But yet where they are, they're at a very high elevation, and already they get so many feet of snow a year. Will you be able to dig out to get to it, if it gets that cold? And every area is going to have its challenges. Some are going to be dealing with massive floods on the scale of maybe Noah's floods. It's a pick your poison, listen to your instinct.
Yeah, that's where the being flexible part needs to come in.
North America's snow cover extent almost off the charts as Earth's temperature sinks below 1979 to 2000 average. And we know all the temperature records that have fallen, and now things seem to be just going on exponentially.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, it's really taking off right now. And over here we see snow turns blood red and green in Antarctica. More signs of the times. This is a sign from God, right? We've heard about the oceans turning red. And by the way, I wasn't aware, but our dear sister Judy over in Fort Myers area, much love Judy, was telling us that the red tide is still around.
Yeah, it is. And somebody mentioned in the comments that you could melt snow for fresh water, but I'm thinking like as the snow falls, doesn't it accumulate what's in the air too?
It's funny. She doesn't know what I got in here, but we're going to kind of cover a little bit of that too. So this, they're saying, is basically, it's an algae bloom, which again, probably wouldn't be too good to drink if you had to. And persistent flooding damages thousands of homes and just tons of land in southern Mozambique. And, like our good friend David, again, keep quoting Adapt 2030, he was just saying that he thinks that, by the end of this year, people will be, they'll be faced with the fact that, we are in a major situation here.
Yes, and it'll become more and more real.
So the tornado that went through North Carolina, it was an EF3. February tornadoes are super rare. And to get one that's an EF3 already in the season, what does that portend?
Yeah, that looks a little weird.
Well, again, it's the clashes between the systems, and the systems are getting more and more extreme. That big, huge, enormous iceberg has disintegrated. The one that they were worried about crashing into one of the South Georgia islands and potentially taking out a lot of penguins. Thankfully, Mother Nature must have pushed that in a different way, because they don't really have an explanation for why it changed direction. But it did change direction, and now it just crumbled.
Yeah, so there's that.
Remember, too, this is in so many ways a fractal hologram that we're living in. So we have a lot of power that we just haven't realized to change things. And so I'm not going to play this, but it's interesting because this has been done a lot. A lot of people have tried to melt snow. And what they get at the end is, well, for one, I mean, sometimes it actually goes on fire. Why would snow go on fire? And then at the end of this, there's these really strange looking particles that come out that are left. Really odd looking little kind of plastic-ish particles there in the snow. So, if you're desperate and you're going to be melting snow for water, be aware you might be ingesting plastics or certain things.
Isn't that terrible? Filter it, boil it, do what you will, but you're going to end up with something in it, looks like.
ONAN, and figure that anagram out.
ONAN.
Yes. There's so much more going on than meets the eye. And so we see the Atrahasis. Now this is 2,000 years, or roughly, maybe even more, BC. This predates anything that we have that's biblical by a mile. It's not even close. So, we've talked about this before. It talks about the creation of the world, and also it starts before there were humans. When the gods instead of man did the work, bore the loads, the gods' load was too great, the work too hard, the trouble too much. So the elder gods make the younger gods do all the work. After digging the beds for the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, then the young gods finally rebel. Enki, the god of wisdom, suggests the immortals create something new, human beings who will do all the work instead of the gods. One of the gods, whose name actually means the god who has sense, offers himself as a sacrifice to this endeavor and is killed. The goddess Nintu, the mother goddess, also known as Ninhursag, adds his flesh, blood, and intelligence to clay and creates 7 male and 7 female human beings. And there you go, and then people are off, and before you know it, they're reproducing like crazy, and then the earth is so populated that Enlil, the king of the gods, he's annoyed by the constant disturbance from below, and so he decides to lessen the population by first sending drought, pestilence, and famine down upon the earth. And when we go into the Old Testament, the God of the Old Testament seems very, very different than the God of the New Testament, and it becomes obvious to people because the God of the Old Testament's always doing the same thing, sending, plagues and famines and etc. And, basically the population gets reduced, and then everything starts to happen all over again in another cycle. It's really interesting. And so after each of the plagues, the humans appeal to the god who first conceived of them, Enki, and he tells them what to do to end their suffering and return to a natural productive state, to keep working the resources of the earth for the gods. Very interesting, isn't it? And then eventually, of course, we have the flood. And, again, this is 2,000 years before anything biblical. So, this is where the origins come from. And we have hundreds of thousands of these. But I don't think this is necessarily the oldest wisdom that we have. I think the oldest wisdom really comes out of the Indus Valley, which is left over from Atlantean, Lemurian, and perhaps whatever is predating that.
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff there. This is just something that shows us the cyclical nature of things when it's manipulated, I think.
Interesting. The noise of humankind is too loud for me. This is Enlil. With all their uproar, I can't go to sleep. Cut off their food supply to the people. Let plant life to feed them be scarce. Above, let Adad withhold his rain. Below, let the flood not rise from the deep. Let the wind blow and parch the ground. Let the clouds thicken, but only drop drips. Let the fields lessen their yields. Let Nisaba seal up her breast. So interesting. And this is after 1,200 years that people have been multiplying and, got to be a nuisance.
Yep. And then they do this.
And then back in 1967, Betty Andreasen was abducted by these beings, and she asked the little gray guy, "Who are you?" And their reply was, "We are the Watchers."
Go figure.
Yeah, so here we go again. The Watchers up in the heavens, over the earth, watching everything that goes on, doing genetic experiments, probing, prodding, manipulating, storing DNA. So she had been chosen for a mission, and psychiatric tests after the abduction showed her to be really sane and reliable. And she had seen all sorts of beings in a sort of stasis. They were being saved. They're being saved, just like you would maybe, save a couple of sheep, save a couple of goats, save a couple of cows, save a couple hens.
You're not talking about something like Noah's Ark, are you?
Yeah, kind of like that.
Oh.
A Noah's Ark that,
Yeah.
in a saucer-shaped vehicle.
Oh, gotcha.
So we could see this little clip from the book, The Watchers. Our analysis of the UFO abduction phenomenon must start with the question of the origin of man himself. Why? This is when the aliens informed Betty and Andreasen that they were given responsibility to be caretakers of the forms of life on Earth. Well, that sounds benevolent, doesn't it? But it doesn't sound benevolent when we start hearing the talkings, the rantings, and the ravings of Enlil.
Right, yeah, then there's that.
So earlier we had speculated about the possibility that an advanced extraterrestrial race genetically interfered with Earth primate life form to produce Homo sapiens. It's possible that the same race created the Watchers at the same time and appointed them as caretakers, or took them from a different area, or just basically set them up, middle management.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so many things that when you start connecting the dots, it becomes obvious of what's going on.
This is an interesting part too, and this is referring to the Greys. Is it possible that the same race created the Watchers at the same time and appointed them as caretakers? Evidence derived from reports indicates that the Watchers, now the Greys, were created from Homo sapiens himself. Yeah, interesting. So, that's an interesting thought as well, or at least the Greys that are watching over here. And this says the aliens have spliced into the human seed to prolong the form so that nothing will be lost when the last shall come, or the next big reset comes as well. And, perhaps we are on the verge of that great big reset. And we have movies like Knowing, which shows the earth erupting and frying the earth basically. But before that happens, these beings who at first look very, very Nord-like, very, very Pleiadian-like, encapsulated in what appears to be human flesh, are going around and picking out some particular genetic seed, kids, perhaps gifted kids, to save. And then right before the main event and the earth is gone, they grab all these kids and then they go bring them to a new world. And it's like a new Garden of Eden.
Right. So, I mean, this is the cyclical nature of things that we keep running into these stories over and over and over. And that's, if you allow yourself to go outside the box and read this information and start putting things together, and you realize, wow, things really are not as they seem.
Oh, not at all. And there is most definitely a lot of manipulation in very high places, so to speak. And when we say high places, we mean up over our heads as well as in different densities, because there are amazingly benevolent, beautiful beings that are on the higher planes that want nothing but good for all life forms. And then there are those life forms that look at everything as if it's just their property, just another herd, just another gaggle.
Yeah, kind of like as if we had sheep or goats or something.
Exactly. So guys, make sure you are subscribed. Thank you for your support on Ko-Fi and Patreon. Anybody that needs to reach out to us and make an appointment, it's evolutionaryenergyarts@gmail.com or EEARTS at protonmail.com. Don't ever lose track of the fact that there is so much inherent power inside each and every one of us.
Yes, and absolutely remember that, and keep sending the good energy to people. If you can think of it, I was thinking on the hour, every hour, depending on what time you have, let's please send this energy to people who need it, people who are in dire straits, and let's give them some help. With that, God bless and namaste.